In this video, I'm going to walk you through a field-by-field review of the hardware asset record in Flexera One. The credentials you will need to perform these functions in IT asset management is the default operator's role or higher. Let's get started. Let's open up an asset record and walk through that real quick. You will see there's an asset name and there'll be an asset type. There are device assets and there are non-device assets. Device assets would be considered a laptop, a mobile device, server, or a workstation. All other asset types would be considered non-device assets. Next one, you would see if this is linked to an inventory device, then you would see this populated, and you would also have a folder you could click on to open that inventory record itself, or if that was blank, you could hit search and search the inventory and associate an inventory record with that asset. Serial number is populated. You have a place to populate an asset tag, manufacturer, part number, and model. Many of these properties are being populated through the information with the linked inventory. You could also link this to a master asset. So if this was a subordinate asset of something such as a monitor, you could link it to its primary asset, calling it the master by searching the assets and selecting an asset and linking that there. Next is status. This would be the status of the actual asset, and this is very important because if you do have linked inventory, this status can affect the status of the linked inventory in an automated fashion. Let's look at this a little bit. If you look at the top one of disposed, I'm going to talk about disposed and I'm going to talk about retired together, because they do have the same function. When those are enabled, so if I go from an installed to one of these two, disposed or retired, I will get end of life information. This is where you can record a retirement date, a resale price, retirement reason, a recipient, or a written off value, or an actual disposal date. You would record that under your end of life. Keep in mind that if the asset is linked to a piece of inventory and that asset is in a disposed or a retired status, that linked inventory would be automatically put in an ignored state. Next item is in storage. In storage, if the inventory device is linked to an asset that is marked in storage, that inventory device status would remain active, but its software or any software inventories on that would not contribute to the compliance calculations in the system. If the asset is in an installed state, then its linked inventory would be put in an active state. There is one for other and one for purchase that you can also populate on the asset record. You can also assign a category from either custom ones that you've created, such as I have a client category and I have an asset category. You can assign a category to that asset record. This next section is last inventory. There is an electronic date and a buy populated, and that is populated because we are linked to an inventory device. So the last scan would have happened from the inventory device perspective, and you would see the electronic date that it was last scanned and which inventory connection that was brought in under. You also have one for a physical inventory date if you are doing physical inventories, and you can also record who performed that physical inventory. You have the ability to label an installed on date as well to the asset. And you have an information box where you can put in general notes for this asset record. Let's navigate to the hardware tab now. And as you can see, we have processors, cores, threads, and sockets. The reason why you see this populated is because we're linked to an inventory device, and these are properties that are brought in through the inventory process. The next tab is ownership. You'll see at the top a populated location, corporate unit, and cost center. This can be advantageous if you have these in your external data when you bring in your asset devices, because those can be synchronized to the inventory device based on the asset's properties. Next one, you can assign a user to this particular asset. You would also see the calculated user and the last logged on user populated from the inventory device. Our next tab is a financial tab, and you can see I'm in acquisition mode purchased. We can record a delivery date, a warranty type, and an end of warranty date. This end of warranty date will have a view that we will review in our next demonstration. Next section is depreciation. So you can track the current value, residual value, depreciation method, years, and rates if you so choose. On this asset, you can also record any charges and frequencies for this asset. Let's change our acquisition mode to leased, where you'll see we can still record the delivery date and the warranty end date, but we now have some additional information under leased information. We can record the lease agreement, the lease number, the start date and end date of that lease agreement, the lease price, the buyout, the payments, and a period. Keep in mind there is a view that we'll go over in our next demonstration that feeds off of this leased end date. You also have a lease termination, termination date, and termination reason, and the ability to record an amount for charges and a frequency there as well. Our next tab would be a sub-asset. And so a sub-asset would be something like, let's say this device has a monitor and we are tracking monitors as non-device assets. I could search my asset registry and search for something for a monitor. And you can see I have a monitor. I could add that asset, and that would become a sub-asset of this primary asset. That is how sub-assets work. You can have many sub-assets under one asset record. Next tab is contract tab. On this contract tab, you can associate any hardware type contracts that you are managing in the contract system with this record. I happen to have one in our system that is a Dell hardware support contract. And so I am going to add the contract in that payment schedule here. And so I can have that directly linked to the asset being managed by this contract. Next tab would be purchases. If we had purchases in the system for hardware devices, then when those were brought in as assets, you could link them to the purchase that they were purchased under. You also, like all records in the system, have a Documents tab and a History tab where you can see any changes and when this was created and last updated.